So, Bruno, I want to come to you because on the Latin American front, I mean, I know you've been very, very active on the data privacy side as they relate to AI governance systems and other autonomous machines. Talk to us a little bit about how Latin America is thinking about AI governance and what particular contribution we need to hear from you, right, in your representation that could be enhancing the current conversations we're having today.
Thank you. Thanks so much for an invitation, Nicole. It's a really pleasure to share this panel with all of you. And I'd like to begin to echo what Chinasa highlighted before, like Global South, it's like not a kind of universal umbrella. We do have a lot of similarities, but we do have a lot of difference, and it's not different in Latin America as well. And but we do have also common challenge, and I'd like to highlight three of them. As Chinasa highlighted before, labor rights. We are seeing how the Global South is like the infrastructure, human infrastructure for data labeling, and we have to have this discussion frankly, how we should advance by providing real labor rights and labor protection. So it's quite important, the movement that Lula, president of Brazil, and Biden is doing right now, maybe thinking about G20 next year. Also about the environmental impacts of AI. We could see how the Global South countries, we are seeing illegal extraction of minerals, gold, which is, let's say, the material effects of AI and the really true side effects of AI in the whole production. So I'd like to highlight two of them to start: labor and environmental impacts of AI. I think those are two priorities and common challenges in the Global South. And at the end of the day, it's about inequality, how AI is reinforcing inequalities in the Global South countries.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me, and Bruno, I want to bring you in on here, right? We're sort of importing into this conversation some other areas that are not necessarily discussed in the United States, right? Outside of, ethics, as Chinasa has said, norms and standards, climate is something that, we don't often talk about here in the US. I'm curious, what about data privacy, right? And how does that factor into this conversation? Because the United States doesn't have a federal standard. It makes no sense that we are still without a federal president. That's another panel for another time. But just curious, how does that actually import itself into this conversation as well?
Yes, definitely. I'd like to say that data protection laws are, let's say, one of the best tools that we have to govern AI right now. Like we have more than 100 countries that have comprehensive data protection laws. So a concrete example, when we are discussing about discrimination, about amplification of inequalities, we are discussing how automated decision-making is doing wrong choice, basically. And data protection laws have a plenty of rights, such as the revision of an automated decision-making, such as the explicability or the transparency requirements in a way that data subjects should be aware how they are being judged and treated. And this is like a big tool, because we have a lot of constitutional values in common, such as due process. We are talking about due process, informational due process. So that is one of the trends, regulatory trends that we are seeing, not only in Brazil, but also in other jurisdictions. But I would say also that we have to be aware that data protection laws are not like the silver bullet, because we are also discussing about data without being personal data. So as Ashta pointed out, we are having a discussion about data as an infrastructure. And then we have to harmonize data protection laws with open data policies, because we do have to reshape antitrust law. We do have to redress monopolies, data monopolies, but we do have to see what is the role of the state, of the governments, by advancing open data policies in order to break the barrier of entries in which our economy could take leverage of our data in order to mitigate anti-discriminations, automate decision making. And third, I would say that impact assessments, not only data protection impact assessments, but also algorithm impact assessments. But so far, I would say that the enforcement of those tools are quite weak because we are not having public scrutiny on them, and consequently, we are not reducing the asymmetry of information to have, as Landry pointed out, a network governance in order to flourish the benefits of AI, and not only having the risks and the side effects of AI. So at the end of the day, it's still a debate about reducing the asymmetry of information and consequently of the power in this economic chain.
Bruno, what about your thought on this? How do we get more voices to the table, more people actually bringing their opinions to these larger scale established institutions as well as coalitions?
Yes. I'd like, first of all, to establish a dialogue between the points that were raised by Ashta and also Landry. I think, we should not underestimate the geopolitical complex issues behind of this agenda. And one of the key words that are being used, at least to diminish the stress between this agenda, is interoperability, not only in terms of technology, but also in terms of governance or even from the regulatory point of view. That's why we are seeing OECD abandon the term harmonization and use interoperability, because it's impossible to harmonize all interests, but it's possible to establish a dialogue between them. But then we have this huge risk. What it means regulatory interoperability, technological interoperability, because we can also see a kind of legal colonization, tech colonization, and so on. That's why it was so important that Ashta highlighted that data being considered as infrastructure, we are going to do and do some political choice in a way that could be emancipatory as well. So, for instance, if what does mean if India and Brazil really wants to build financial or payment infrastructure? It passes something for the world, or even when we are doing some choice with regards, what does it mean if Brazil puts as one of its priority build a data infrastructure for combat or address deforestation? Because data is not raw, data is not the oil, but data is being cooked. We do our political choice and technological choice in that regard. So I'm curious to see how this interplay between regulation, governance, and also national policies would produce some results that might be interesting to see from the geopolitical point of view. And as Ashta said, we have a pretty interesting platform, because for the first time in the history, G20 is going to have a South Troika, a South-South Troika, passing from India to Brazil and from Brazil to South Africa. Yeah. So it's a really nice platform, a really nice, unique moment that we can have this conversation by having those countries under the presence and talking in an equal way with the global north. Yes. And we are going to see policy briefs in that direction. And I'm hopeful and optimistic, as Ashta said previously, in that regard.
I'm wondering if the speakers could address any regulations or policies surrounding critical minerals, mining concerns. I want to say generally, just to sort of adapt this question, some of the climate concerns, go into a little bit more detail about the climate concerns. Bruno, you want to pick that one up?
Yes, because we are discussing right now in Brazil 5 or 6 AI draft bills in the parliament. One of them I was involved being part of the commission of jurists that was created by the Brazilian Senate. And it's been quite interesting, the discussion in that regard. Because here, again, the regulation can play a critical role in terms of innovation. For instance, by providing that climate is a critical factor to verify if an AI is considered as a high risk or not, and also what are the duties of all the stakeholders in a very complex supply chain as well. So this is specific draft bill that I worked. We have some interesting guidelines in terms of not only quantitative criteria, but also qualitative criteria in that regard. And once again, like if you have like a risk-based approach, how we can see that the regulation would be, let's say, more flexible in a way that we could create an AI, generative AI to map automated decision making in terms of deforestation and so on. Like the benefits are greater than the risks, and therefore the regulatory burden would be much lower. So we are having this discussion because there are some narratives that are wrong, that the regulation would kill that kind of innovation, and it's pretty much the contrary. So I think now we are addressing this kind of conversation in a way that we are having more sophisticated discussions about what kind of taxonomy of risks would inspire regulation.
Thank you so much for that. That makes a lot of sense, given the fact that, as I think we all realize as we wrap up this conversation, that this has really been a conversation that's been happening for quite some time. What our goal is at Brookings is to just bring more profile and visibility to those dialogues that are occurring across the world, and ensuring that we not only capture, from what you heard, some of the cultural efficacy that's coming out of different nations, but also this conversation on how these conversations can be collaborative and helpful moving forward, and actually have moving targets, but also set standards that allow us to create a global AI universe.